Hello and welcome to Vixis' entry into the interactive category for the Price Transparency Challenge. We're going to go through the site to show you how you can use it, how you can access a lot of data very quickly and easily so you can make some informed decisions about your healthcare provider. First thing about the site that you'll notice is that there's a three-step process you can go through to explore the site, and I'm going to go ahead and start doing that a little bit. Once I go ahead and choose a diagnosis code, from the list provided, what you'll see is the map get updated and have a national display in terms of this diagnosis, all the different places and providers that charge different prices for this procedure. Areas in red indicate areas of high charges, and those in green are much lower. It also displays the specific providers that have both the highest and the lowest price across the country. Now I can actually go ahead and go through this list and scroll and actually explore to see all the different diagnoses and where the highest and lowest ones tend to be. If I actually go over to an area that has the highest charges for DRGs, you'll see that major joint replacements are absolutely a high cost type of item. Now, this is all fine from a statistical standpoint, but what does it mean to me? And that's when you actually go into step 2 and start entering a location to be able to see what you can do with this data. As an example, if I go ahead and enter in an address, there'll be a couple of things that happen on the screen. First, a list of providers that are near me are going to show up. Now, this shows me all of the providers that not only are closest to me, but different characteristics about those providers. So for instance, how much do they charge? What are the average payments that Medicare reimburses to them? How many discharges do they actually have? The list is sortable in any of these categories, so I can see that in my area, Ohio State charges the highest at $67,000. The closest provider to me is Dublin Methodist Hospital. So one of the things that I could do is absolutely navigate through this and see all of the healthcare providers around me for this given diagnosis. I can actually also go beyond just the initial 25 miles and, for instance, go all the way out to like 70 miles to see even beyond just my local regional area to see who's actually charging the highest prices. In this case, Clinton Memorial Hospital is about 60 miles away from me and has $26,000 for this DRG code for major joint replacement. Now, one of the things that I could do very quickly is also navigate through to different areas of the country. So if I, for instance, wanted to go in here and start looking at California, it'll automatically show up to see all of the areas in California. And I could enter any kind of location that I want to. New York, for instance, which has a higher density of healthcare providers around there. But I'll go ahead and stick with my area so we can explore a little bit more. Now, one of the things that we'll go ahead and do is that I'm going to be a consumer and I'm interested in seeing some more details about 3 hospitals specifically. Riverside Methodist, Ohio State University, and Grant Hospital, which I don't see over here. Let me increase my distance here. There it is. And Riverside. And once I'm okay with that, I'll go ahead and add those selected providers to my review list. And what I'll see is basically some cards that give some information about those specific hospitals. But now it also shows a detail level comparison of those 3 hospitals and all of the medical classifications that those DRGs are now grouped under. I can see, for instance, very quickly that Ohio State tends to be the organization near me that charges the most money. I'm not sure why that is, but I'd sure like to understand it some more. So let me go ahead and collapse a little bit of this. One of the things that we'll find is that when you're looking at charge comparison data, one thing that's useful is also to understand, well, what kind of quality do you get when you're actually at one of these institutions? The site actually picks up data from the CMS Hospital Compare site and actually allows you to see a lot of very interesting statistics per provider. So for instance, how long does the emergency room, how long do I have to wait in an emergency room if I come over there? There's lots of great data that shows that, and the site pulls that in. If I look at imaging statistics, what's the percentage of times that this provider does MRIs? Are they doing MRIs too much more than their comparable providers, for instance? and also hospital-acquired conditions. If I have a fall somewhere in the hospital, what's the likelihood of that happening? And it turns out that Ohio State, if you look over here, only has a 0.1% incident where that happens, whereas the other two institutions tend to get a little bit more. So Ohio State does pretty good with that. The other thing I can tell is how large those institutions are. The site pulls in the number of physicians that are employed or actually have affiliations with each of the providers. So in this case, the site has broken it down by specialty, and you can see that Ohio State is a fairly large institution. They've got lots of specialties represented. A lot of times this helps you understand if you're dealing with a large provider or somebody that's smaller. So it's certainly something that gives you some insight into that. Now, one of the things that I can do is, when I look at the charge data over here, let me go ahead and expand that. I can see that, well, I definitely don't want to go to Ohio State, but Riverside looks like it's pretty interesting. Now, the one thing that you have to understand about healthcare is that you're typically not driven by what hospital you want to get a service provided for. You typically have to go through your insurance company, and for that, you need to understand who your doctor is. Can your doctor actually go to Riverside? One of the things the site does is that you can actually, it pulls in data that associates which physicians across the country are associated with which providers. So I can go into the site and actually find a physician that I know. So for instance, I'll go ahead and find a physician that I work with, an internal medicine doctor over in Ohio, in Columbus. And I can just go ahead and start typing in data, and eventually it'll find out some of the providers and the doctors that are near me. In this case, I'll choose this provider right over here. And the site automatically updates to indicate who this provider is, where they're located, and what privileges they have in different institutions. Now, shoot, she doesn't go to Riverside Methodist, so she doesn't have privileges there, but she does over here at Grant Medical Center. So a lot of times being able to see where the doctor is affiliated is oftentimes a driver in where you choose to go get health care. But again, back up to my question, why is Ohio State charged so much more? Is it because it's a university? Is it something that has something to do with that? Well, I can compare that very quickly. I can go ahead and remove the Grant Medical Center in Riverside. And let's say I want to choose some universities that I want to compare Ohio State to. So I'll go ahead and start typing in a name, and it'll go out and find some universities that have the partial name that I entered. So I'll pick Emory University. I'll go ahead and I'll pick maybe Duke University here too. And again, very quickly, I can see all the exact same data that I saw before, but now I'm comparing across different regions. And I still see that Ohio State is much more expensive than either institutions that are out there today. If I look at the charge data, for instance, I can see, for instance, that Ohio State charges twice as much more for musculoskeletal types of classifications than Emory does. And if I look down over to the number of physicians, I can see it's maybe Ohio State's a little bit bigger. Duke certainly has a lot more anesthesiologists, for instance. But that doesn't explain why Ohio State's so much. And so the question is, what the site allows you to do is start asking those questions to be able to go to Ohio State and say, maybe if there's some reason for those excess charges, let's see if we can understand that and have a dialogue. Anyhow, you can use the site to explore as you need to. Feel free to do that. I hope you find it useful, and thank you for the presentation.